The summer sun hung low over the rolling fields of Willow Creek, painting the endless rows of corn in hues of gold and shadow. Elena Vargas wiped sweat from her brow, her calloused hands gripping the steering wheel of her battered pickup as she surveyed her land. 300 acres of prime soil, passed down from her grandfather, who had tilled it through droughts and recessions alike. The air was thick with the earthy scent of ripening kernels and distant rain, but tonight something felt off, a faint, acrid tang cutting through the familiar musk, like smoke from a hidden fire. She'd noticed the first wisps at dusk, curling up from the eastern edge of the field like ghostly fingers. By the time Elena grabbed her extinguisher and raced across the dirt path, flames had erupted in a savage line, devouring the stalks with a roar that drowned out the crickets. The fire spread fast, fueled by dry wind and what she suspected was accelerant. Gasoline, maybe, judging by the oily sheen on the ground. Her heart pounded as she battled the blaze, the heat singeing her arms through her flannel shirt, the smoke stinging her eyes until tears blurred her vision. Sirens wailed in the distance, but by the time the volunteer fire department arrived, half the field was ash, a blackened scar mocking her from the hillside. Standing amid the smoldering ruins the next morning, Elena clenched her fists, the crunch of charred earth under her boots a grim soundtrack to her fury. The sheriff's deputy, a wiry man named Harlan with a mustache that hid his perpetual skepticism, scratched notes on a pad. "Arson, no doubt," he muttered, kicking at a melted plastic bottle half buried in the dirt. "But no prints, no witnesses. Folks around here know better than to poke into feuds like this." Elena shot him a sharp look. Feuds? Her family had kept to itself for generations, selling corn to local mills and avoiding the whispers of trouble from the city limits. Harlan hesitated, glancing toward the river that bordered her property, its waters sluggish under the July haze. "Heard rumors. That new development upriver, the Lakeside Estates. Word is, Victor Russo's crew pushed for it. Your field's in the way of their expansion plans. Water rights, access roads. You get the drift." Victor Russo. The name slithered through Elena's mind like a cold current. Everyone in Willow Creek knew of him. The Mafia boss who'd clawed his way from the docks of the city to control half the construction rackets in the state. His face graced tabloids, sharp jaw, eyes like polished obsidian, and his reach extended to quiet towns like hers, where bribes silenced questions and fires solved problems. Elena's stomach twisted. Russo's men had approached her months ago, offering a pittance to buy her out. She'd refused, citing the legacy of her land, the way it fed her community co-op. Now, this. As Harlan drove off, promising to look into it, she knelt by the bottle, its label faded but recognizable, cheap motor oil from a city depot. A clue, small but deliberate, like a taunt. She pocketed it, her mind racing to the old dam upstream, a relic from the WPA days, controlling the river's flow to her fields and the fancy neighborhood Russo had built on the floodplain below. That night, alone in her creaky farmhouse, Elena pored over maps spread across the kitchen table, the lamplight casting long shadows on yellowed blueprints. The dam's controls were manual, rusted levers in a control shack she'd maintained herself as the town's unofficial engineer. Her father had taught her the mechanics. Open the floodgates too wide, and the river would swell, inundating lowlands for miles. It was a desperate thought, born of rage and the sting of loss, her harvest gone, her savings teetering. But as thunder rumbled outside, promising a storm, she weighed the cost. Drown Russo's precious estates? It would be poetic justice, a flood to match his fire. Yet the human toll gnawed at her. Families, homes, the very lives she'd sworn to protect by keeping her land pure. By midnight, the decision crystallized. She slipped into rain gear, the patter on the tin roof masking her truck's engine as she drove the winding road to the dam. The structure loomed in the darkness, a concrete behemoth etched with graffiti and the hum of neglected turbines. Sodium lights flickered along the catwalk, their yellow glow reflecting off the churning water below. Elena's flashlight beam danced over the control panel, her fingers trembling as she unlocked the gate with a key from her glove compartment. The air smelled of wet stone and ozone, the river's roar a constant growl. She hesitated at the levers, heart hammering. This wasn't just revenge. It was war. Footsteps echoed faintly, perhaps a guard or her imagination. No, Russo's operation was sloppy in the sticks. He'd rely on intimidation, not patrols. With a deep breath, she pulled the first valve. Water surged with a guttural groan, the river awakening like a beast unchained. Alarms should have blared, but she'd disabled the outdated system weeks ago during routine maintenance. No one would know until morning. As she worked the second lever, headlights pierced the gloom from the access road. A black SUV crested the hill, tires crunching gravel. Panic surged through her. Russo's men? She ducked behind the shack, pulse thundering in her ears. The vehicle slowed, engine idling, but no doors opened. Was it surveillance? A burner phone call away from disaster? Elena held her breath, the floodgates now half open, the water level rising inexorably toward the valley. The SUV lingered, then peeled away into the night. Coincidence? Or the first thread of a larger web? As rain lashed the dam, Elena slipped back to her truck, the river's fury building behind her. By dawn, Russo's neighborhood would wake to chaos, and she'd be the ghost in the flood. But who had sent that car, and what did they see? The first light of dawn crept over the horizon like a thief, turning the sky a bruised purple as Elena Vargas guided her truck back down the muddy access road. Rain had eased to a drizzle, but the river's roar echoed in her ears long after she'd left the dam, a relentless thunder that mirrored the storm in her chest. The wipers slapped rhythmically against the windshield, smearing streaks of red clay across the glass. Her hands gripped the wheel too tightly, knuckles white, the pocketed motor oil bottle a heavy weight in her jacket like a guilty secret. By the time she reached the farmhouse, the fields below the dam were already transforming. Water lapped at the edges of the lower pastures, dark and insistent, seeping into the soil with a soft, sucking sound. Elena parked under the sagging oak, its leaves dripping onto the hood, and stepped out into the chill. The air carried the metallic tang of wet earth and something sharper, fear perhaps, or the faint ozone of impending lightning. She scanned the tree line, half expecting the black SUV to reappear, but the road lay empty, shrouded in mist. Inside, the kitchen felt smaller, the maps still scattered like battle plans from a war she'd just declared. Elena brewed coffee, the pot gurgling like the floodgates she'd unleashed, and forced herself to eat a slice of stale bread. Her mind replayed the night, the lever's groan, the headlights slicing through the dark. Who had been in that vehicle? A scout for Russo, checking his arson handiwork? Or someone else? A rival sniffing out weakness in the boss's empire? Willow Creek wasn't big enough for secrets, but Russo's world thrived on them. Burner phones buzzing in coat pockets, discreet ledgers hidden in waterfront offices. The phone rang, shattering the quiet. An old landline, rarely used except for co-op orders. Elena stared at it, heart skipping. She let it ring twice more before picking up, her voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. Vargas Farm. Elena. The voice was smooth, accented with the city's gravel. Italian roots, she guessed, from the way it rolled her name like a threat wrapped in silk. This is Victor Russo. We need to talk. She froze, the receiver slick in her palm. How had he gotten her number? The co-op directory, probably. Or worse, public records twisted by a hacker on his payroll. Mr. Russo, she said, injecting ice into her tone. If this is about my field, save it. Your offer was insulting then, and your fire last night makes it criminal. A low chuckle, devoid of humor. Bold words for a woman who's just flooded half my development. Lakeside Estates is underwater as we speak. Evacuations starting. Sirens blaring. You think the sheriff won't trace this back to you? Elena's breath caught. So soon? The dam's flow should have built slower, giving her time to vanish into the morning. But the storm had accelerated it, turning trickle to torrent. She glanced out the window. In the distance, taillights flickered on the elevated road to the estates, emergency vehicles cutting through the fog. Trace what? Storms happen. Dams age. If your fancy houses are on a floodplain, that's on you. Don't play coy, Elena. I know about the controls. Manual overrides, no alarms. Sloppy maintenance on your part, or sabotage on mine. His pause was deliberate, laced with the hum of traffic in the background, as if he were already en route. Meet me. Neutral ground. The old warehouse by the docks. Noon. Come alone, or my men make house calls. The line clicked dead, leaving only the dial tones buzz. Elena slammed the receiver down, her pulse racing like the river she'd set loose. Neutral ground? The docks were Russo's territory. Rusted cranes silhouetted against the gray water, shipping manifests forged in back offices, guards with earpieces patrolling the perimeter. Why there? To intimidate her, show the machinery of his world. Crates of untraceable imports stacked under sodium lights. The slap of waves against concrete pilings, carrying whispers of betrayals past. She paced the kitchen, boots thudding on the worn linoleum. Going was suicide. Staying meant warrants, questions about the disabled alarm she'd justified as budget cuts to the county inspector. But curiosity gnawed. Russo's voice had held no blind rage, only calculation, like a chess master who'd anticipated her countermove. Was the SUV his, watching her open the gates? Or a plant, someone in his crew turning the knife? By 10, she'd made her choice. Moral duty warred with survival. Her land's legacy demanded she face the arsonist, but prudence screamed to run. She grabbed the motor oil bottle, slipping it into her satchel alongside a pocket knife and her grandfather's old revolver, rusted but loaded. The drive to the docks wound through sodden fields, the radio crackling with flood warnings. Residents of lakeside estates, seek higher ground, river levels critical. The warehouse loomed on the waterfront, a cavernous relic from the mill days, its corrugated walls streaked with rust and graffiti. Elena parked at the edge of the lot, gravel crunching under tires, the air thick with diesel fumes and brackish water. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp against the distant wail of sirens. She stepped out, wind tugging at her jacket, and spotted the black SUV, same model, plates obscured by mud, from the dam. 2 men in dark suits flanked the side door, their postures relaxed but eyes scanning like hawks. One nodded her toward the entrance, no words exchanged. Inside, the space echoed with hollow drips from a leaking roof, pallets of unmarked crates casting long shadows. Russo waited at a makeshift table in the center, lit by a single hanging bulb that buzzed faintly. He was taller than she'd imagined, broad-shouldered in a tailored coat, his face all angles and stubble, eyes locking onto hers with unnerving intensity. "You came," he said, gesturing to a chair opposite him. No entourage visible, but she felt their presence, the faint crackle of a radio in the rafters, the scuff of boots beyond the crates. "Gutsy, after what you did." Elna sat, chin lifted, the chair's metal cold through her jeans. "You burned my life's work. I returned the favor. Call it even." Russo leaned forward, elbows on the scarred wood, his cologne cutting through the musty air, sandalwood and smoke. "Even. My investors are pulling out, families displaced. But you're not just a farmer. That damn key in your pocket? I have eyes everywhere." He slid a photo across the table. Grainy, time-stamped from last night, showing her silhouette at the controls. Surveillance cam, hidden on the access road. Her stomach dropped. The SUV hadn't left. It had watched. "Who took this? One of your arsonists?" A flicker in his expression. Surprise? Calculation. Not mine. That's the problem. Someone's playing us both. Meet my inside man tomorrow. Or this photo goes to the feds. Your choice, Elena. As she stood, the warehouse door creaked open, rain gusting in. But who was the inside man, and why pull her deeper into Russo's web? The rain lashed the warehouse door like an uninvited guest, slamming it shut behind the figure who slipped inside. Elena's hand instinctively brushed the revolver in her satchel, but Russo didn't flinch. He just watched, his obsidian eyes narrowing as the newcomer shook water from a trench coat, the fabric dripping onto the concrete floor in steady plinks that echoed through the cavernous space. "Luca," Russo said, voice low and edged with gravel, like tires on wet asphalt. "You're late. And soaked." The man, Luca, nodded curtly, his face half-shadowed under the hood, jaw set like carved stone. Mid-40s, maybe, with a scar tracing his left cheekbone, the kind earned from a blade rather than a fall. He carried a leather briefcase, its clasps glinting under the buzzing bulb, and moved with the deliberate gait of someone who'd patrolled these docks too many times. The air thickened with the scent of salt and rust, mingling with the faint, oily residue from the crates stacked like silent sentinels around them. Elena stayed rooted, her pulse a steady drum against her ribs. This wasn't the inside man Russo had dangled like bait. It felt like an interruption, a ripple in the carefully scripted confrontation. "Who's this?" she demanded, her voice cutting sharper than intended, betraying the churn of suspicion in her gut. Russo's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "My fixer. Luca handles the logistics. The photo? He pulled it from a feed I didn't authorize." He tapped the image on the table, the timestamp mocking her. 2:17 a.m., her hand on the lever, unmistakable even in the grainy blur. Someone hacked the county's traffic cams along the access road. Not pro work, amateur overlay on a public server. But it's enough to bury you if the feds get wind. Luca set the briefcase down with a thud, snapping it open to reveal a tablet and a stack of printouts. His fingers, calloused and scarred, swiped the screen, pulling up a map dotted with red pins. The dam, her farmhouse, the burned field, and a cluster along the river's bend where Russo's estates now festered in floodwater. "Trail starts here," Luca said, his accent thicker than Russo's, laced with the old neighborhood. Brooklyn, maybe, or worse. Burner phone pinged the arson site 2 hours before the fire. Traced it to a pay-as-you-go bought at a gas station off Route 9. No prints on the oil bottle you pocketed, but the manifest from that depot. Delivered to a shell company tied to the Ricci family. Rivals. They've been sniffing around our construction bids. Elena's mind reeled, piecing the fragments like a puzzle with jagged edges. The Ricci crew, whispers from the co-op, old-timers muttering about turf wars spilling from the city. They'd muscled into trucking routes last year, undercutting Russo's docks with cut-rate bribes. But why her field? Leverage, maybe, to force Russo's hand on the water rights, or pin the arson on him while they sabotaged from the shadows. She leaned over the table, the wood splinters rough under her palms, inhaling the faint must of aged paper. "So, the SUV at the dam, was that Ricci's? Watching me flood your mess to frame you both?" Russo exchanged a glance with Luca, a silent code passing between them. Heavy with years of shared secrets. "Possibly," Russo admitted, his tone measured like weighing a loaded dice. "But my code doesn't bend for rivals. No innocents caught in the crossfire. That's how I keep the machine running. Your land, those families in the estates, they're collateral I won't abide. Meet the inside man tomorrow, Elena. He'll confirm the play. Neutral spot. The old tunnel under the bridge, 8 p.m. Come alone." The tunnel. Elena knew it. A relic from Prohibition days, bricked over, but with service hatches still used by maintenance crews, its damp corridors echoing with the river's subterranean pulse. Hazardous in storms, prone to blackouts from faulty wiring, and a perfect ambush spot if Russo's word soured. Autonomy clashed in her chest. Walk away, let the feds unravel the mess, preserve her independence. Or dive deeper, driven by the moral fire that had her grandfather fighting eminent domain decades ago. Loyalty to her legacy meant facing the blaze, not fleeing its smoke. Luca closed the briefcase, the snap echoing like a gunshot in the quiet. "Don't be late," he muttered, eyes flicking to her satchel as if sensing the revolver's weight. Ricci's not patient. They've got eyes on the flood, diversion crews already pumping water. But if they link the dam to you... Outside, the rain had intensified, drumming on the roof like impatient fingers. Elena pushed through the door, the chill wind whipping her face, carrying the briny slap of waves against the pilings. Her truck's headlights cut through the downpour as she drove away, the warehouse shrinking in the rear view, its sodium lights blurring into halos. The photo burned in her memory, not just evidence, but a hook pulling her into Russo's orbit, where possessiveness masked as protection. By evening, back at the farmhouse, the flood's aftermath played on the radio. Evacuations complete, but damages mounting in the millions. Russo's name whispered in every report. Elena spread the maps again, tracing the tunnel's entrance, her finger lingering on the access code she'd glimpsed in county files. Simple numeric pad, no biometrics, vulnerable to a jammed signal or cut wire. A partial truth emerged. The arson wasn't solo malice, but a calculated betrayal from within Russo's fractured empire. Ricci's play, using her rage as the spark. Sleep evaded her, the storm's rumble a constant reminder of levers pulled and lines crossed. Dawn brought a false calm, mist rising from the saturated fields like ghosts. She loaded the revolver properly this time, chambering rounds with a metallic click that steadied her nerves. The drive to the bridge wound through sodden backroads, taillights of repair crews flickering ahead, the air heavy with mud and diesel. The tunnel mouth yawned under the overpass. Chain-link fence parted just enough for foot traffic. Graffiti-scrawled walls dripping condensation. Elena's boots echoed on the grated walkway, the hum of distant generators vibrating through the damp stone. Flashlight in hand, she descended, the beam catching rivulets of water snaking down the walls, the smell of mildew and old brick thick in her throat. Footsteps approached from the shadows, 2 sets, deliberate. Not Russo. Her grip tightened on the light. "Inside, man?" she called, voice steady despite the knot in her chest. A silhouette emerged, flanked by another. "Yeah," came the reply, rough and unfamiliar. "But Russo didn't send me." The second figure stepped forward, pulling a hood low. The scarred driver from the SUV, tension coiled like a spring. As the lights flickered, plunging the tunnel into near black, Elena's beam caught a glint, a knife in the first man's hand. Ricci's trap, sprung early. But how deep did the betrayal run, and would Russo's code hold when the flood turned to blood? If you're enjoying this story so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The tunnel's damp chill seeped through Elena's jacket like a warning, the air heavy with the tang of rust and stagnant water that pooled in shallow depressions along the concrete floor. Her flashlight beam sliced through the flickering darkness, illuminating the knife's edge. A cheap switchblade, its gleam cold and opportunistic under the stuttering emergency lights. The first man lunged, his boots splashing in a puddle, face obscured by a pulled low cap, but his movements screamed amateur, too eager, no grace in the strike. Elena twisted aside, the blade whispering past her arm, close enough to nick the fabric of her sleeve. Adrenaline surged, hot and electric, drowning out the distant rumble of the river above. She swung the flashlight like a club, connecting with his wrist in a crack of plastic and bone. The knife clattered away, skittering into the shadows. But the second figure, the scarred driver from the SUV, closed in fast, his bulk blocking the narrow passage. He grabbed for her satchel, fingers like iron clamps, but she drove her knee up, catching him in the gut. He grunted, doubling over, the stink of cheap cigarettes and sweat filling the confined space. "Ricci sends his regards." The first man snarled, scrambling for the blade, his voice echoing off the curved walls like a bad echo in a nightmare. "Russo's done. Your flood was just the distraction." Distraction? Elena's mind raced, piecing the logistics amid the chaos. Ricci's crew timing the dam breach to sow blame, using the arson as cover while they infiltrated Russo's docks, siphoning shipments from those unmarked crates. No supernatural luck, just human greed, burner phones coordinating from a safe house miles away, guards bought off with promises of a bigger cut. She yanked the revolver from her satchel, the metal cool and reassuring in her palm, thumb flicking off the safety with a practiced click her father had drilled into her during harvest hunts. "Back off!" she barked, leveling the barrel at the scarred man's chest. The lights buzzed back to life briefly, casting their faces in harsh yellow. The driver with his jagged scar twisting in a sneer, the other clutching his wrist, eyes wide with the realization that she wasn't the easy mark they'd pegged. The tunnel hummed with the vibration of traffic overhead, tires hissing on wet asphalt, a reminder that the world above churned on, oblivious to the betrayal unfolding below. The scarred man straightened, hands raised but mocking, his laugh a wet rasp. "Shoot, farmer girl. Cops'll love the ballistics. Trace it to your granddaddy's old permit. Russo's code? He won't come for you. We're cleaning house." Doubt flickered in Elena's gut. A push-pull of trust versus the isolation she'd clung to all her life. Russo's words echoed. His internal rule, no innocents harmed, a legacy forged from some past loss she could only guess at, maybe a family caught in an old turf war. But was she collateral now, or something more? Possessiveness in his gaze at the warehouse, veiled as strategy, clashing with her fierce autonomy. She wouldn't be owned, not by fire or flood or a boss's pledge. A scuff of boots from deeper in the tunnel froze them all. The first man whipped around, but it was too late. Luca burst from the gloom, coat slick with condensation, a silenced pistol in his gloved hand. He fired twice, precise pops muffled by the damp stone, dropping the attackers in heaps. The scarred man slumped against the wall, eyes glazing, a crimson bloom spreading across his shirt. No gore, just the efficient finality of a pro's work. The other twitched once, then stilled, the switchblade forgotten in the murk. Luca holstered the weapon, his breath steady, face impassive under the scar. Russo's code holds. No loose ends. He stepped over the bodies, offering Elena a hand up, but she waved him off, holstering her revolver with trembling fingers. The air reeked of cordite now, sharp against the mildew, the emergency light stabilizing into a steady hum that illuminated the scene like a crime show set. "You were watching," she accused, wiping sweat from her brow, the tunnel's chill raising gooseflesh on her arms. The inside man was a setup? Luca nodded, retrieving a burner phone from the scarred man's pocket. Its screen cracked but alive with incoming texts. Coordinates for a warehouse hit tonight. Manifests listing diverted cargo from Russo's docks. Ricci's mole in Victor's crew. That SUV at the dam. Bait to draw you out, make you the patsy. We traced the hack on the cams. Amateur, but sloppy enough to leave a trail back to their safe house upriver. Your flood bought us time. They thought you'd run, not fight. Elena's chest tightened, gratitude warring with suspicion. Russo's world pulled her in like the river's current. Protective, yes, but laced with the fear of deeper entanglements. Loyalty to her land meant allying with the devil who'd eyed it first, or watching her legacy drown in legal fees and rival vendettas. And now? You clean this up? Pretend it never happened? He pocketed the phone, gesturing toward the exit stairs, where faint daylight filtered through grates. Russo wants you safe. Meet him at the penthouse overlook. City side, 10 p.m. He'll explain the play. Ricci's pushing for the water rights through proxies, using your field as leverage. We hit their convoy tonight, extract the ledger from their lead truck. Guard rotations are every 15 minutes, plates from a fleet off the manifest. But it's your call, Elena. Walk away, and we handle it. Stay, and you're in. The tunnel's walls seemed to close in. The drip of water a metronome to her racing thoughts. Outside, the storm had broken. Sun-piercing clouds in shafts that danced on the river's swollen surface. Elena climbed the stairs, boots echoing, the weight of choices heavier than the revolver at her hip. Russo's penthouse, high above the fray, glass walls overlooking the docks and warehouses, security cams sweeping every angle, the hum of elevators like veins in his empire. A world of luxury masking the grit. Leather chairs, aged whiskey, but always the undercurrent of surveillance, distant watchers in unmarked vans. By dusk, she'd returned to the farmhouse, the fields a muddy expanse under clearing skies. The dam's roar subdued now that crews had partially closed the gates. She pored over the maps again, tracing the convoy route. Back roads to the waterfront, vulnerable at the tunnel underpass, where a staged blackout could jam signals and block exits. Human error in Ricci's ranks, overconfident guards, a driver with a tell, like the way he'd glance at his watch, could tip the scales. But victory, it would cost exposure to feds sniffing flood fraud, or worse, the fracture of Russo's code if innocents strayed into the crossfire. As night fell, stars pricking the velvet sky, Elena loaded extra rounds into her satchel, the metallic scent grounding her. The drive to the city wound through neon-lit suburbs, the penthouse tower rising like a sentinel, its lights winking against the dark. Valets in crisp uniforms nodded her through the lobby, the marble floors echoing her steps, air scented with polished wood and faint jasmine from hidden vents. The elevator hummed upward, smooth and silent, depositing her on the restricted floor. Russo waited on the balcony, city sprawl at his feet, a glass of amber liquid in hand. Wind tugged at his shirt, carrying the distant lap of water against the piers below. "You came," he said, voice soft but intense, eyes searching hers. Luca filled me in. Ricci's betrayal runs deep. One of my own drivers turned, feeding them access codes. Elena leaned on the railing, the metal cool under her palms, overlooking the convoy's projected path snaking through sodium-lit streets. And the ledger? Proof to bury them? He nodded, stepping closer, the space between them charged with unspoken tension. His possessiveness a shield against her independence, loyalty tested by the night's risks. Extraction at the underpass, but it's dangerous. Blackout, infiltration. Join us, or stay here, safe. The city's pulse thrummed below, generators humming in the warehouses, a staged fire perhaps diverting patrols. Elena met his gaze, the pull undeniable. But as sirens wailed in the distance, was the convoy already rolling? And would the ledger reveal a betrayal that ensnared them all? The city lights sprawled below like a glittering web, the penthouse balcony's glass railing reflecting the neon haze back at Elena as she stood beside Victor Russo. The wind off the river carried a faint chill, laced with the distant tang of exhaust and brackish water, a reminder that the flood's muddy aftermath still clung to the lowlands. Russo's presence was a solid anchor, broad shoulders cutting the night air, his cologne mingling with the whiskey's sharp bite on his breath. But Elena felt the pull of his world like a riptide. His gaze held a possessive edge, promising protection while chipping at her hard-won solitude. "You don't have to go," he said, voice low, threaded with the gravel of too many late-night negotiations. He set his glass on the ledge, fingers brushing hers in a touch that lingered just a beat too long, testing perhaps the fragile trust forming amid the ruins of her field and his estates. Luca and the crew can handle the convoy. Ricci's sloppy. Their lead truck's plates match a manifest from last week's dock shipment, easy to tail with a drone feed from the overpass. Elena shook her head, the revolver's weight in her satchel a counterpoint to the luxury around them. The penthouse interior loomed behind, all sleek lines and shadowed corners. Leather sofas under recessed lights. A wall of monitors displaying security feeds from the docks. Grainy angles of cranes swaying. Guards' rotations clocking every 15 minutes as predicted. No magic in the tech, just off-the-shelf cams networked through a private server, vulnerable to a jammed signal if someone knew the frequency. Her ethics warred with the pragmatism of survival. Aligning with Russo meant trading her independence for his code, a vow against harming the innocent, shaped by a sister lost to a rival's crossfire years back. Or so Luca had let slip in the tunnel. "I started this," she replied, meeting his eyes, the city's hum vibrating through the floor like a pulse. "The fire, the dam, my choices flooded your world. If Ricci's using me as the fall guy, I see it through." Curiosity burned hotter than fear. The ledger wasn't just evidence of betrayal, but a map to the water rights scam, discreet entries tying her land to shell companies that could bury the arson rap for good. Yet suspicion lingered. Russo's calm calculation, the way he'd anticipated her at every turn. Was this alliance real, or a velvet trap to claim her legacy as his own? He nodded, a flicker of approval crossing his sharp features, but his hand tightened on the railing, knuckles paling. "Then we move now." Convoys rolling from the upriver warehouse, 3 trucks, armed escorts in the trailing van. Blackout at the underpass hits in 10. Power lines there are old, easy to trip with a remote cut. No bravado, just logistics. Human error in Ricci's crew, a driver with a nervous tic who'd glance rearward every intersection, burner phones pinging off towers that Luca's team could spoof. Elena followed him inside, the elevator's descent smooth, depositing them in the underground garage where black sedans idled, engines purring like restrained beasts. The drive sliced through rain-slicked streets, wipers slashing arcs across the windshield, the sodium glow of street lamps painting the dashboard in amber streaks. Luca rode shotgun, tablet in lap, swiping through live feeds, the convoy's taillights snaking along the river road, a good mile out. "Guard rotations tight," he muttered, voice clipped over the radio's static. But the lead driver's off, hesitating at turns, like he's waiting for a signal. Could be the mole feeding real time. Elena's stomach knotted, the leather seat creaking under her as they merged onto the back road paralleling the tracks. The underpass loomed ahead, a concrete throat shadowed by the bridge's iron girders, graffiti bleeding down the walls in the headlights' sweep. Storm drains gurgled with runoff, the air thick with wet asphalt, and the faint acrid whiff of ozone from the impending cut. Russo's hand rested on the gear shift, close enough to hers on the armrest that she felt its warmth, a silent anchor amid the rising unease. Loyalty versus fear. His code demanded precision, no bystanders in the fray, but one jammed exit or false alarm, and the night could turn hazardous fast. They parked in the tree line, engines killed, the convoy's rumble growing louder, headlights piercing the gloom like accusatory fingers. Luca handed out earpieces, the static crackle linking them to spotters. Drones up. Thermal shows 4 in the lead cab, 2 per truck behind. Elena slipped into the shadows of the underpass, boots silent on the gravel shoulder, the river's sluggish lap below a constant underscore. Russo flanked her, his breath steady, but she caught the subtle tell. A muscle ticking in his jaw, betrayals from his past etching lines around his eyes. The blackout hit on cue. A muffled pop from the tree line, sparks arcing from the power lines as the remote overload fried the grid. Darkness swallowed the underpass, broken only by the convoy's beams swinging wild as brakes squealed. Tires locked on wet pavement, the lead truck fishtailing into the narrowed lane, blocked by the overpass's support beams. No easy reversal, exits jammed by the curve. Shouts echoed from the cabs, doors cracking open, flashlight beams stabbing the black like frantic fireflies. "Now," Russo whispered, voice taut as piano wire. They moved low, skirting the drainage ditch, the mud sucking at their soles. Elena's heart hammered, the satchel's strap biting her shoulder. A guard emerged from the trailing van, radio crackling with confusion. Signals jammed. Hold position. But Luca was already on him, a chokehold swift and silent, zip ties binding wrists before the body hit the ground. No mess, just efficiency born of dockside scraps. They reached the lead truck's door as the driver stumbled out, fumbling for his piece, that nervous glance over his shoulder betraying the incoming text on his burner, coordinates for a safe house drop. Elena lunged, tackling him into the gravel, the impact jarring her bones, his curse cut short by her elbow to the throat. Russo yanked the cab door, rifle slung low, scanning for the others. "Clear," he called. But a shadow detached from the second truck. Another guard. Spotting the scuffle, raising his weapon. Gunfire cracked, muzzle flash blooming orange in the dark, bullets ricocheting off concrete with a metallic whine. Elena rolled behind the tire, shards of gravel stinging her cheek, the acrid burn of powder filling her nostrils. Russo returned fire, precise bursts pinning the shooter, but a stray round clipped the truck's fuel line, hiss of leaking diesel, the spark of a dropped lighter igniting a whoosh of flame that licked up the undercarriage. Heat bloomed, turning the underpass into a furnace, smoke billowing thick and choking. "Ledger's in the glove box," Luca shouted over the roar, dragging the driver limp. Elena scrambled up, flames casting hellish shadows on the bridge above, the distant wail of sirens piercing the night, false alarm or real pursuit. She rifled the cab, fingers slick with sweat, pulling the slim binder. Pages of coded entries, water rights transfers laundered through her field's deed, Ricci's signature scrawled like a venomous promise. Victory edged close, but the fire spread, blocking the rear exit, heat warping the air. Russo hauled her back, arm around her waist, possessive, protective, their eyes locking in the inferno's glow. "We go now." But as they retreated toward the tree line, a new set of headlights crested the hill. Backup? Rivals? Or feds drawn by the blaze? The ledger burned in her grip, proof of the organized threat. But at what cost had they snatched it from the flames? The flames clawed at the underpass's underbelly, their orange tongues licking the concrete with a voracious hiss, turning the night into a cauldron of heat and shadow. Elena clutched the ledger to her chest, its edges singed but intact, the paper warm against her skin like a stolen heartbeat. Smoke billowed in thick, acrid waves, stinging her eyes and coating her throat with the bitter tang of burning diesel and rubber. The air thrummed with chaos, the crackle of fire, the distant wail of sirens growing sharper, and the low growl of the approaching headlights cresting the hill. Unmarked vans, their silhouettes bulky against the sodium glow of the distant city lights. Russo's grip on her waist tightened, pulling her deeper into the tree line, his breath hot against her ear amid the roar. "Move. Now." His voice cut through the din, urgent but controlled, the kind of command honed from boardrooms and back alleys alike. Branches whipped at their faces as they plunged into the underbrush, mud sucking at their boots with wet, insistent pulls, the river's sluggish murmur below a mocking counterpoint to the inferno they'd ignited. Luca flanked them, tablet tucked under his arm, his scar stark in the fire's flickering reflection. Backup's Ricci's, 3 vans, heavy. They must have pinged the blackout from a spotter drone. We bought 10 minutes. Tops. Elena's lungs burned as they scrambled up the embankment, the ledger's weight a talisman of the night's gamble. Pages inside detailed the betrayal, discreet ledgers cross-referenced with shipping manifests from the docks. Water rights funneled through shell companies that looped back to her farm's deed. Arson as the opener. Her dam breached the diversion to mask Ricci's grab for the floodplain. No grand conspiracy of ghosts, just cold logistics. Hacked county records. Bribed inspectors signing off on faulty dam maintenance. A driver in Russo's crew feeding guard rotations via encrypted apps. Human error everywhere. The mole's sloppy texts time-stamped too close to the fire's start. A behavioral tell in his evasive glances during warehouse shifts. They burst onto the back road, the sedan's black bulk waiting in the gloom, engine idling with a restrained purr. Russo shoved her into the rear seat, sliding in after, his body a barrier against the world outside. Luca gunned it, tires spinning gravel as they peeled away, the underpass shrinking in the side mirror. A pyre now, flames leaping higher, illuminating the jammed convoy like a sacrificial rite. The pursuing headlights surged, engines roaring to life, but the curve of the road bought them distance, taillights blurring into the night. Inside the car, the air was thick with sweat and tension, the leather seats creaking under their weight. Elena flipped open the ledger under the dashlight, her fingers smudged with soot, scanning entries that blurred through watering eyes. Look, here. Ricci's proxy bought options on my field 6 months ago, before the offer from your crew. They torched it to force a sale, pin it on you for insurance fraud. The flood. Time to drown the estates and blame negligent oversight on your development permits. Her voice cracked, anger coiling tight, ambition versus prudence, her independence eroded by the web they'd spun around her legacy. Russo leaned close, his shoulder brushing hers, the contact electric in the confined space. Possessiveness flickered in his eyes, a vow unspoken, protection at any cost, his code a bulwark against the chaos that had claimed his sister years back, caught in a rival's staged warehouse blaze. They underestimated you, he murmured, hand covering hers on the page, warm and steady. That fire on your land? It was the spark. But this, he tapped the ledger, ends it. We leak it to the feds anonymously, through cutouts. No traces back to us. Luca glanced in the rear view, the pursuing van's beams dancing closer, a low-slung pursuit that screamed modified suspensions and reinforced bumpers. Not if they catch us first. Radio's jammed, our spoof's holding, but they've got numbers. Take the tunnel bypass. It's risky with the flood residue, but it'll shake them. The driver punched the wheel, veering onto a service road that hugged the riverbank, water lapping perilously close, the scent of mud and decay seeping through the vents. Elena's stomach lurched as the sedan hydroplaned briefly, tires hydroplaning on pooled runoff, the environment turning traitor. Storm-swollen ditches, blackouts lingering in rural grids. Gunfire peppered the night, muffled pops from the trailing van shattering the rear window in a spray of glass. Elena ducked, shards tinkling onto the seat like brittle rain, the acrid zip of bullets whizzing past. Russo twisted, firing back through the jagged hole, his shots precise, forcing the lead pursuer to swerve. "Hold on," Luca barked, slamming the brakes at the tunnel mouth. A narrow bore drilled through the hillside, its entrance framed by chain link and flickering hazard lights, water dripping from the arch like tears. The sedan fishtailed inside, darkness enveloping them, headlights bouncing off moss-slick walls, the echo of engines amplifying into a thunderous roar. Inside, the tunnel constricted like a vein, emergency strips glowing faintly along the floor, casting elongated shadows that danced with every jolt. The pursuing vans followed, but the narrow gauge bottlenecked them, one scraping sparks off the wall with a metallic screech, buying precious seconds. Elena's pulse thundered, the ledger pressed to her ribs, trust fracturing under pressure. Russo's arm around her now a cage or a lifeline. Loyalty to her farm demanded she sever ties, vanish into the co-op's anonymity, but the pull of his world, its dangers, its fragile honor, tested her resolve. "Why me?" she demanded over the din, voice raw. "You could have let Ricci take the hit alone." His eyes met hers in the dash's glow, intense and unyielding. "Because you fought back. No fear, just fire. My code, protect what's real. Your land, this mess. It's ours now." The words hung, a pledge amid betrayal, autonomy yielding to the bond forged in flames. The tunnel spat them out onto elevated tracks, the river glittering below under moonlight, the pursuers lagging as Luca wove through rail sidings. Sirens converged from the city, feds or locals drawn by the blaze, no easy escape, exposure looming like the dawn. But as the sedan merged onto the highway, the ledger's secrets secure, a new shadow loomed. A burner phone in Luca's pocket buzzing once, screen lighting with a single message. Coordinates to Russo's safe house, and a name, the true mole, closer than they'd dreamed. Was it one of them? And how far would the betrayal flood before the waters receded? If this tale already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more hidden stories to light. The highway blurred into a ribbon of blacktop under the sedan's headlights, the engine's hum a low counterpoint to the ragged breaths inside. Elena pressed back into the leather seat, the ledger's edges digging into her ribs like a guilty secret, its pages heavy with the ink of betrayals. Glass shards from the shattered rear window glittered on the floorboard, catching the dashboard's blue glow, while the river's scent, muddy and insistent, seeped through the cracked frame. Sirens faded behind them, swallowed by the sprawl of suburbs giving way to industrial outskirts. But the tension coiled tighter, a spring wound by the burner phone's single buzz in Luca's pocket. He fished it out, screen's light etching harsh lines on his scarred face, his thumb swiping with the precision of someone who'd decrypted 100 such threats. "Coordinates," he muttered, voice gravel over the radio's dying static. Russo's safe house on the east docks. Old cannery conversion. But the message. It's from inside. Signed Viper. That's not Ricci code. It's one of ours. Russo's jaw clenched, his hand still lingering near Elena's on the seat, a possessive anchor that both steadied and confined her. The city lights streaked past, sodium halos on rain-slicked asphalt, the distant cranes of the waterfront silhouetted like skeletal guardians. "Pull the feeds," he ordered, eyes locked on the rearview, where shadows played tricks. No pursuers yet, but surveillance was Russo's shadow. Unmarked vans with thermal cams lurking at every overpass. Elena's mind raced. The ledger's entries, cross-referenced with the phone's pings, pointed to a deeper fracture. Viper, a code name from old dock ledgers, tied to a lieutenant who'd handled the initial buyout offer on her field. Close. Too close. Loyalty frayed like the burned cornstalks, her independence clashing with the pull of this makeshift family, forged in fire and flood. Luca nodded, tablet balanced on the wheel as he navigated the curving service road, tires humming over expansion joints. Access logs show a breach. Someone spoofed the penthouse server during the blackout. Pulled guard rotations, convoy routes. It's the driver from my crew, Marco. Nervous tick matches the one in the cab tonight. He was the mole feeding Ricci the dam's weak points. The cannery loomed ahead, a brick behemoth reclaimed from the river's edge, its windows darkened but for the faint pulse of security lights along the perimeter fence. Chain link topped with razor wire hummed faintly with current, the air thick with the briny slap of waves against loading docks and the low groan of moored barges. They slipped through a side gate, Luca punching an override code into a keypad that beeped green, the mechanism's click echoing in the empty lot. Inside, the safe house unfolded like a fortress disguised as luxury. High ceilings vaulted with exposed beams, leather armchairs clustered around a stone fireplace, but every corner whispered vigilance. Motion sensors blinking red, a wall safe humming behind a false panel, the faint crackle of encrypted radios from hidden speakers. The scent of aged wood and salt mingled with fresh coffee from an auto brewer, a domestic touch amid the arsenal of locked cabinets stocked with burners and ledgers. Elena set the retrieved binder on the oak table, its surface scarred from years of tense counsels, flipping to the damning page. Viper's initials scrawled beside a transfer for her water rights, dated the week of the arson. "He played us both," she said, voice steady but laced with the chill of realization. "Used my refusal to bait the fire, then the flood to cover his skim on the estate's insurance. But why tip you now? This message, it's a trap. pulling us here. Russo paced to the window, parting heavy drapes to scan the docks, where fog rolled in off the water like a living shroud, muffling the gulls' cries. His reflection stared back, eyes shadowed by the weight of his code. No innocence. A vow etched from the night his sister vanished in a rival's staged warehouse inferno, her loss a scar deeper than Luca's. Because he's turning full. Ricci's promised him the docks if he delivers us. Surveillance cams outside. I'll loop them. Stage a blackout from the generator shed. You stay here, Elena. Lock the inner door. Her pulse quickened, autonomy surging against his command. The push-pull electric in the room's charged air. Like hell. I've got skin in this. My land's deed is the linchpin. If Viper's coming, we face him together. She grabbed a spare earpiece from the table, clipping it on, the static a lifeline to the unseen watchers. Spotters in a van a block out, feeding thermal reads of approaching heat signatures. Russo's gaze softened fractionally, possessiveness yielding to respect, but fear lingered in the lines of his face. The cost of pulling her deeper, exposing her to the fractures in his empire. Luca checked his pistol, sliding extra clips into his coat, the metallic snick sharp in the quiet. 2 minutes to the shed. Generator's old. Easy jam with a cut wire, but it'll draw them in. Marco's vehicle plates match the SUV from the dam. He's rolling with 3 Ricci heavies, armed light but motivated. They moved as a unit, boots soft on the polished concrete floor, slipping out a rear exit into the fog-shrouded yard. The cannery's walls loomed, dripping condensation, the river's lap a rhythmic threat below the elevated docks. Distant generators thrummed, their hum vibrating through the ground, while sodium lights cast long, wavering shadows that hid subtle tells. A footprint in the gravel too fresh, a burner phone's glow from behind a crate stack. At the shed, Russo knelt by the panel, tools glinting in his flashlight beam, fingers deft on the wiring. Elena covered the approach, revolver drawn, the barrel steady despite the knot in her chest. Headlights pierced the mist suddenly, crunching gravel. A black SUV, same as the dam, idling with predatory patience. Doors creaked open, silhouettes emerging. Marco first, his nervous glance skyward betraying the drone he knew was watching, flanked by 2 in dark jackets, hands hovering near holsters. "Viper!" Russo called from the shadows, voice amplified by the earpiece, drawing them closer. "You burned her field, flooded my homes. For what? A cut from Ricci's scraps?" Marco stepped forward, face twisting in the fog's diffuse light, his tic evident. A twitch at the jaw, eyes darting to the shed. "Your code's weak, Victor. Innocence? That farmer girl's just collateral, like your sister was to the old bosses. Ricci pays better. No vows holding you back." The betrayal landed like a gut punch, Marco's words laced with old grievances. A grudge from a demoted dock shift years back, festering into this organized rot. Tension peaked as Marco lunged for the shed, his men fanning out. But Luca fired first. A suppressed pop dropping 1 in a heap, the body thudding soft on the wet ground. The second whirled, gunfire erupting in staccato bursts, bullets pinging off the cannery wall with metallic sparks. Elena squeezed off a round, clipping Marco's shoulder, the recoil jarring her arm, smoke's acrid bite filling the air. Russo tackled the last man, a grapple ending in a choke that silenced him against the generator's hum. Marco scrambled back, blood staining his shirt, fumbling for his phone. But the blackout hit. Wires severed, lights winking out in a cascade, plunging the yard into inky chaos. Fog swirled thicker, muffling shouts, the river's roar amplifying the disorientation. Elena's beam caught Marco's retreat toward the SUV, but Russo was faster, pinning him against the hood, fist connecting with a dull thud. "The ledger's ours. Your play ends here." Panting, Marco spat blood, eyes wild. "You think it's over? Ricci's got copies, your safe house compromised. The feds are en route, tipped by my last ping. Sirens wailed faintly from the city, closing in, the cost mounting. Exposure, arrests, the fragile trust between them tested to breaking. Elena holstered her weapon, the ledger safe but the victory hollow, Russo's arm around her shoulders a promise amid the peril. As Luca zip-tied Marco, bundling him into the SUV for extraction, the true flood of betrayal crested. Who else in Russo's inner circle carried Viper's venom, and could they outrun the sirens before the safe house became a cage? The sirens wailed closer, a piercing crescendo slicing through the fog-shrouded docks like a predator's cry, their Doppler shift echoing off the cannery's brick walls. Elena's heart hammered in sync, the revolver still warm in her grip, its barrel smoking faintly in the blackout's gloom. Marco slumped against the SUV's hood, zip-tied and bleeding from the shoulder wound, his face a mask of defiance twisted by pain. The air hung heavy with cordite and salt, the river's relentless lap below, underscoring the fragility of their standoff, water rights, legacies, all teetering on the edge of exposure. Russo straightened, wiping blood from his knuckles on his coat, his eyes scanning the perimeter where shadows pooled deeper under the severed generator's dying hum. "Get him inside," he barked to Luca, voice low but ironclad, the code in his posture. No loose ends, but no needless cruelty. Luca hauled Marco up, the man's grunt muffled as they dragged him through the rear exit, boots scraping gravel. Elena followed, the ledger tucked under her arm, its pages a brittle shield against the encroaching chaos. Fog clung to her skin like a second layer, cold and clammy, carrying the faint diesel tang from moored barges creaking in the current. Inside the safe house, the inner sanctum felt smaller now, walls closing in under the weight of betrayal. Luca dumped Marco into a chair by the fireplace, the leather creaking in protest, and secured him to the arm with another tie. The monitors flickered back to life on auxiliary power, feeds showing patrol cars converging on the waterfront, red and blue lights pulsing through the mist like warning beacons. "Feds," Luca confirmed, swiping the tablet, his scar pulling tight as he zoomed on license plates. "Tipped by Marco's ping, but they're circling the blaze at the underpass. We've got minutes before they sweep here." Elena's breath came shallow, the push-pull tearing at her, autonomy screaming to bolt for her truck, vanish into Willow Creek's muddy fields, but loyalty rooting her to this fractured circle. Russo's world had invaded hers, fire on her corn, flood on his estates. But in the ledger's stark entries, she'd seen the threads binding them, shared enemies, a mutual code against the innocent. Marco's eyes darted, that nervous tick flaring, a behavioral tell screaming guilt. "You think this ends with me?" he rasped, blood flecking his lips, the words laced with the desperation of a cornered rat. "Viper's not alone. Ricci's got a plant in your co-op, Elena. Old Harlan, the deputy. He's the one who buried the arson report, fed them your damn schedules." The revelation hit like a gut punch, Harlan's skeptical mustache and evasive notes flashing in her mind. Subtle inconsistencies now glaring. His glance toward the river during the investigation, the delayed fire response. No grand illusion, just institutional rot. A small-town cop on the take, access codes swapped for envelopes of cash, shipping manifests altered in quiet diners. Elena's fists clenched, the cost crystallizing, injury to her trust in the community she'd bled for, exposure risking her farm's deed in federal probes. "Why?" she demanded, stepping forward, the revolver half raised, her voice echoing off the beams. Marco's laugh was wet, bitter. "Money. Your land's the key. Water for their new casino build upstream. Russo's in the way, with his code holding back the real plays. The fire? My idea, to smoke you out. Flood? Ricci's bonus, drowning Victor's leverage." Russo loomed over him, face a storm cloud, the past loss etching deeper lines. His sister's death not accident, but an echo of this greed, a warehouse rigged with faulty alarms. "Your greed ends the line," Russo said, voice steady, pulling a recorder from his pocket, capturing the confession in crisp digital bytes. No torture, just the weight of truth, his internal rule a restraint amid the urge for vengeance. Luca bundled the recorder with the ledger, sealing them in a fireproof case. Upload to the cutout server. Anonymous drop to the DA by dawn. Plates on Marco's SUV traced to a Ricci fleet. Feds'll connect the dots. Sirens swelled outside, tires crunching the perimeter gravel, spotlights sweeping the fence like accusatory fingers. Russo cut Marco's ties just enough to stage a struggle, shoving him toward a side door. Run to your masters. Tell Ricci the code holds. Marco bolted into the fog, a shadow vanishing toward the docks, the distraction buying them seconds as shouts erupted. Freeze! Federal agents! They moved like a well-oiled machine, Elena's boots silent on the concrete as they slipped through a hidden panel to the cannery's underbelly tunnels. Damp stone chilled her bones, the air thick with mildew, and the river's subterranean growl, flashlight beams bouncing off rivulets snaking the floor. No jammed exits here, just manual grates, rusted but yielding to Luca's pry bar with a groan. Above, chaos reigned. Agents breaching the safe house, radios crackling with confusion over the empty chairs and staged prints. They emerged on the far docks, a speedboat idling in the shadows, engine muffled by the fog. Russo helped Elena aboard, his hand lingering on hers, a pledge, not possession, the warmth cutting the night's bite. The boat sliced the water, wakes slapping pilings, the city receding into a haze of lights. Luca throttled up, wind whipping their faces, the ledger case stowed below decks. Exposure loomed, feds sniffing her name in the flood reports, Harlan's arrest rippling back to Willow Creek. But victory's cost was measured. A grazed arm from the underpass gunfire, now bandaged, and the sacrifice of isolation for this found alliance. As dawn broke, painting the river in soft golds, they docked at a private slip upriver, the farmhouse visible in the distance. Her land, scarred but standing, water levels receding under emergency pumps. Russo turned to her, eyes reflecting the rising sun. The threat's broken. Ricci's empire crumbles with the ledger out. But you're no collateral. Stay, build with me, not as mine, but us, protecting what's real. Elena met his gaze, the pull undeniable. Trust earned in flames, family chosen over solitude, loyalty outlasting the power plays. Weeks blurred into repair, fields replanted with co-op aid, estates rebuilt under stricter codes, Harlan's badge stripped in a quiet scandal. The ledger's leak buried Ricci without a trace back, human error in their ranks sealing the coffin. Elena stood on her porch one evening, river murmuring below, Russo's truck rumbling up the drive. No grand spoils, just the quiet transformation. Her independence woven with his restraint, memories of fire and flood forging a legacy stronger than ash or water. The adventure's true treasure, the bond that outlasted the storm, a family born of defiance and vows kept. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.